Hey, cards in your deck that have power in the top left corner but aren't actions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and today I want to give my preview of Wreck-It Ralph. Wreck-It Ralph is one of the 8 factions in Smash Up Disney, and are largely driven by that movie's signature catchphrase, I'm gonna wreck it. I enjoyed the first Wreck-It Ralph when it came out, and I'm somewhat surprised that it was popular enough for inclusion in this, but their theme does tie nicely into Smash Up. I'm leaning with Wreck-It Ralph because they are the closest to a normal distribution of card designs with only one extra unique card. This is a bit of a palate cleanser because I'll say this about Disney upfront. I am ordering a moratorium on unique minion factions. I'm sick of seeing so many of them at once and messing with consistency, which I'll talk about in a future video. Overall, I mostly like this faction, and that's why I'm leading with them. But I also want to talk about Disney specifically as a lead-in to any of the Disney videos. I think that, given that these sets are designed to bring in new players, there is a certain amount of strength plus that is expected from this expansion. To reduce complexity, you often have to make it easy to do well, regardless of draw or planning, which means either more draw or more value per card. I think we have to understand that all Disney cards come in that context, although I could be entirely wrong. It's not that Disney factions are overpowered, but do some feel above the baseline? Probably, and that's just a byproduct of their goal. But don't take that statement and draw a bunch of negative conclusions. Oh wait, this is the internet. Wreck-It Ralph leads his own faction, and for all the concerns of power creep in the game, it's nice to see a leader who is, in my opinion, objectively weaker than another leader, me. But of course, faction context is everything. Wreck-It Ralph has 7 base modifiers that he can play. Interestingly, Wreck-It Ralph has no internal modifiers that I would say he wants to destroy, which could have been really interesting. Instead, this is just talent-based destruction, and this is actually a minor rule that Sonus and I both share. Talent-based stationary destruction is basically a one-time gotcha at most, and a deterrent thereafter. Players would simply stop playing the destroyable cards there. It's not particularly interesting. Now, Wreck-It Ralph has some mobility, but I haven't found that I want to go around smashing actions. I want to play actions to smash the base that they're on. It's hard not to view Disney through a Disney-specific context, because this has more meaning outside of Disney, because Wreck-It Ralph in that set has by far the most base modifiers. As expected, many of the characters in this faction reference base modifiers, with one notable exception, Vanellope. Vanellope has a talent to move to another base and get +1 power, like an unrestricted Wayfinder, but starts at 3 power instead. I actually find this makes Vanellope better, because of the synergies of power 3, while meeting or exceeding a Spectrum or Cyclone on turn 1. But these are the types of individual power levels you see on unique characters. Vanellope is a good fit because Wreck-It Ralph does a lot of wrecking through movement, and having a mobile character to obscure your true target prevents telegraphing. One of the nice things about Wreck-It Ralph is their mix of power activation and persistence. Sergeant Calhoun can be played early or terminally as the power boost is activated on a talent. I will admit, it's hard to see this card and not think it is immediately better than Steeman, but tell me what you think. With Research Lab Beacon having waste potential you can seed in advance, you can pull minions to help math out exactly what you need. This is also an interesting use case for Escape Pod. Not that I play this card often in Phase 2, but since it moves cards as opposed to minions or characters, you can do some interesting things where Escape Pod moves the beacon and one of your characters to another base, then pulls over more if there is room in the 4 minion limit. While I like most of their cards, even the ones that border on being objectively better than a lot of existing cards, there are a few cards in the faction that do catch my attention for the wrong reasons. And though I can't go over every card, I wanted to talk about King Candy. In Disney, there are a few cards that really feel like it's attacking specific factions, and King Candy is one of them. It's hard for me not to read this card as a direct attack on Nightmare, Mulan, or Big Hero 6, but it also feels like they are going after a player rather than a base. Some counter cards are okay, but I can't really explain why this card makes me feel unsettled. Maybe it's the fact that it's optional movement, so you can keep disabling the same card. It also feels like a character modifier masquerading as a base modifier to have synergy within the faction. The issues aside, Ralph does a lot of nice things. Felix is an interesting character who can do some interesting things offensively and defensively. You can save your own base modifiers for persistence, or remove a base modifier and slow someone else down at the same time. They have a solid mix of movement, waste potential, power increases, extra plays, and persistence, but may struggle to add a lot of power on their turn without proper setup. but that's often how it should be. So who should you look to pair with them? Naturally, base modifier combos will come up, and naturally I won't talk about those, because they are obvious. But I really like them with Spies for a number of reasons, starting with a lot of good mole targets. They have the potential to turn an overpayment situation into a full sale style play. If you play a base modifier with mole, you can move the sugar cart racers to or from that base, allowing for jumping on or jumping off and getting more power too, and all sugar cart racers can do this. But mole is really interesting with escape pod potentially. At the time of publishing I couldn't confirm this, but I would have thought that if mole plays escape pod, you get the phase 2 version and not the phase 3 version, because you are not playing it using its special. But I could be wrong, in which case you just play a different card to move your racers. Given how antagonistic Secret Agent is, persisting it is really strong. I really like the idea of escape podding off to save your best characters while using the spy specials to win or solo the base anyway. It's a real threat given the spy deck manipulation and Ralph's card draw. For a similar feeling about manipulating things in Phase 3, consider some of these cards with expert timing of the Kung Fu Fighters. Since Escape Pod can move cards, this is also a way to conveniently save Titans. For it to be worth saving a Titan, you'd have to think of one who gets a lot of equity and is difficult to bring out, and Rainbow Rock comes to mind for both given the on-off nature. Critter Champion can be camped on a base slinging kart racers, who are like a mobile 3 if you play the right modifier, which could even be Ittypedia. If Critter Champion gets crowded, start pulling them off with Research Lab Beacon. Vanellope is a great target for evolution because you get an upgrade off your 2-power character that can spread out. Ittypedia is the type of action that works with Felix because it has no equity itself, and once you've extracted all the power you need, it lets you remove it safely. This also stops your draw, which for Itties can actually be a good thing since it keeps the critters in your deck. With I Select You selecting Van, who can be played on Ittypedia and immediately move off, it's nice having a sling for a 5-power card from your deck that can be played anywhere. Ittypedia also assumes that you will be playing a few characters there that turn, which lines up nicely with the Sergeant. Speaking of saving Titans, Moon 03 definitely fits the bill as well. Alternatively, this is also really good for killer plants because the mobile racers mean that they don't have to stay on the Venus Mantrap base. Though not as elegant as killer plant truckers, Ralph can keep overgrowth going for the decent amount of time, but they can also do something truckers cannot do, and that's turn it off. If you feel like this isn't the time for an extended overgrowth run, put it back on top of your deck. There's a really nice bait and switch play as you play Sleep Spores on the cart racers to move them off, and score somewhere else with a power boost. Having repeated minion persistence will help the killer plants, who also benefit from having great 3-power targets. Sleep Spores normally cannot be turned off, but this is an area where Felix thrives, because if there's one thing I love to design or facilitate, it's negative power cards that can be turned off when you no longer need the disruption, even though Smash Up tends not to really make a lot of these. Continuing the trend of overgrowth, this is a really good pairing with Werewolves without the Great Talent Killer, because including the Great Talent Killer made this one of the most broken combos I played in recent memory, but there is still a lot to like. You have Marking Territory, which can get the overgrowth treatment. Because of Escape Pod, the Werewolf power boosts are extremely relevant, letting them go in power, then sending them into another base for a double or triple score. It's really easy to get every minion into 4-power range for Frenzy. Since I view Werewolves as area control, Beacon is a really good card for maintaining that lead and also setting up the Werewolf plays. I could go on and on about this combo, but I know that you are still going to use the Great Talent Killer and move an entire player's minions off of a base for a waste strategy. Wreck-It Ralph brings some interesting approaches to the idea of wrecking bases while also having some nice utility within their own faction. Are you excited to try Wreck-It Ralph? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.